Okay, welcome back again. We are up to this part of the strategy section. Weak squares creating outposts. Last video I gave you pawn structures and open games versus closed games. And I know I said I was going to give you 3, and I ended up giving you those 2. So I'm either going to give you this one, weak squares creating outposts, or both, weak squares creating outposts and the art of the trade, and save the mastery quiz for last, or if this video goes into more than a half hour, I can give you all 3. I'm not sure if I can give you all 3 tonight, to tell you the truth. We're gonna try at least the first 2. I might save the mastery quiz for last, because after that is the end game course, and after the end game course is his annotated games and his psychology of competition and things like that. So without too much talking, I'm going to give you the weak squares creating outposts and hopefully the art of the trade. Perhaps I'll touch on the mastery quiz. I haven't decided, while I'm making this video, I haven't decided whether or not I should go ahead and make it close to an hour long and give you the whole thing, and then the next time I make a video I'll give you the end game course, or if I should stretch this out into 2 more videos. I'm having the inclination to make it 2 more videos. So well, anyway, without any more talking, let's go ahead and start this particular one.
Take a look at this position. Here it's white's move.
Whoops.
In real chess games, there won't always be a way to win material right off.
Sorry about that.
Now let's take a look at how pawn structure determines weak squares, and we'll learn how to create outposts for our pieces. It's key to notice squares in or near the enemy camp that can be supported by one or more of your pawns but cannot be defended by your opponent's pawns. If you can occupy that square with a piece that is less valuable than any of your opponent's pieces that can capture it, this can lead to a huge strategic advantage.
Sorry about that little glitch there. It seemed to have started on the second page, but in any case, here we go.
Take a look at this position. Here it's white's move. In real chess games, there won't always be a way to win material right off the bat. Far more often, we have to improve our position strategically. What do you think white's plan should be here? After you've given this some thought, click Next.
Okay.
Well, the d6 square is a fabulous potential outpost for the white knight. After knight d2, an excellent move, planning a maneuver knight e4 to d6, white's position will be dominant. Notice that black can't play d5 beforehand because of en passant. After knight d6, black has little play. The c file is the only open file on the board, and now that the knight d6 guards the c8 square, white has complete control. If you notice weak squares in your opponent's position, then you can make powerful long-term decisions.
If you don't know what the en passant is, or if you're new to these videos that I've been making, if you just happen to catch this one, the very first few videos I made a specific 1 or 2 on the en passant. So I would recommend to go back and check that out if you don't know anything about it. Otherwise, let's continue.
Okay, let's analyze his position after knight d2 a little bit. If black just sits around, his position will get crunched, so he has to do something. If possible, it'd be good to play b7 to b5, and then bishop c8 to b7 to c6. This locks down the c-file, defends the weak d7 pawn, and activates the bishop. That's black's plan. After b5, knight e4, bishop b7 is impossible, though. Why? Because of the fork knight d6 check. So black has to castle. Now white plays knight d6, jumping into the square. Let's say black plays queen c7. Of course, now black can't develop with bishop b7 because the knight guards that square. So queen c7 prepares some development. Do you see how white can win material here?
Oh, I should have re-looked at this one. Okay, I'm thinking that, oh, it doesn't want me to click that. Okay, so how about if we click next?
Knight takes c8
Oh, I was going to do
removes
that.
the defender of the d7 pawn. So knight takes c8, rook takes c8, queen takes d7, wins d7, removing the defender. This wins material, but it has the downside of relieving the pressure on black's position. And this is actually one device when your opponent has a positional advantage on you and is crunching down on your game. For you to relieve that pressure, you can give up a pawn, sometimes even a little bit more, to gain some activity. So it might not even be best for white here to win material. You could also just continue to build up. But because white has this option, black has to try something else. So let's say black saw this, and after knight d2, castles instead. Now after knight e4, queen c7, knight d6, black tries to defend the d7 pawn with rook d8. Notice of course here again, white could play knight takes c8, followed by queen takes d7, winning a pawn. So black defends with rook d8.
Okay.
In fact, this would be a bad way to defend, because black has all of his pieces tied down trying to defend a pawn. What he should have done, like I mentioned before, is give up the pawn to try to gain a little bit of mobility. I would play rook f3. Preparing to triple up on the d file, rook, rook, and queen are a tremendously powerful battery, aiming at the d7 pawn. One thing that you should know is that the optimal tripling formation is rook, queen, rook, like this. But after rook f3, white has another idea. He wants to play rook g3, shifting to a kingside attack. I want you to see how that knight on d6 locks down all of black's position. Black has nothing active. This brings up another critical principle. You see, black has that d7 pawn, which is weak. He also has developmental problems, which is another weakness. And he has a weak king, because the rook on d8, the queen on c7, the bishop on c8, they're all locked down defending the center and the queen side. They can't get to the king's side. So black has two main weaknesses, the d7 pawn and the g7 pawn around the king. This is called the principle of two weaknesses. It's very hard when you have a positional disadvantage, like black does here, to defend two weaknesses. If you can just focus on one, sometimes you can keep things together.
Well, as you can see, we're getting rather technical here. We're almost there. We're almost there. Pretty soon, you'll be knocking on my door waiting to kick my butt in chess. Well, let's continue.
So let's say that black plays here b5, trying to develop. What would you do now?
That's a good question. What would I do now? Hmm. Well, I'm thinking about following what he was saying before about this, or perhaps even this. Okay, let's just out of curiosity. I still think this is good.
No, that's not quite right.
Oh,
Try again.
okay, so that's not right. We'll try two more things. We might go here. I kind of like this move, but I think that's wrong too.
No, that's not quite right. Try again.
Let's go ahead and do this.
No, that's not quite right. Try again.
Really? Let's do one more, then let Josh tell us. I guess I should have went over this before I started this. What do I do here? This is very interesting. Does Josh still want us to take that bishop?
No, that's not quite right. Try again.
Okay, Josh, tell us.
Now white should shift all of his pieces to the king's side. The first move would be queen e4.
Oh, queen e4.
You see, this attacks the rook on a8 and also plans to shoot into the g6 square. It also stops black from developing one more time, because bishop b7 now loses a piece because the knight and the queen are both piled up on that square. So this is a perfect example of how to win a position with a strategical advantage. White stops all of black's ideas while continuing to go ahead with his. Queen e4 attacks the rook on a8. The rook has to move. Let's say black plays rook a7. Now white can jump into the king's side. Queen g6. Finally, black gets to develop his bishop with bishop b7, but it's too late. What would you play now with white?
Okay, I guess I was jumping ahead. I don't know why I didn't see that. The queen on e4 would have been the obvious move now that I see it in retrospect. Sorry about that. This is going to start getting technical, and I'm going to start um, giving you some wrong answers. But of course, we got Josh to correct us. But I do know the answer to this one now, and that is, at least I think I do, and that is now we do move this rook here. I mean, it becomes obvious now that we're going to gang up on this pawn and checkmate the king.
Good job. Here it's all over after rook g3. The queen and the rook are piled up in that g7 pawn, which will be checkmate. Black can't defend, and white will win this game.
Okay.
So here you saw a number of strategic and tactical devices flowing together. We used forks, removing the defender, occupying a weak square, threatened to pile up on the d-file, and ultimately we shifted to a kingside attack based on the principle of two weaknesses. This is what chess is all about. Understanding weak squares and creating outposts are critical to your game. There will be exercises later on in the mastery quiz, so if you're unsure about anything in this section, you might want to review it again before moving on. We just covered a lot of ground.
Yes, I'm going to make that same recommendation. I mean, of course, these videos are being done. I'm actually pushing the buttons on the software. For you, it's videos that you'll have to pause and replay. But a review of what you've learned so far would always be recommended at any time. In any case, let's continue. This is the end of the weak squares creating outposts. And since we're only a few minutes into this video, I'm going to go ahead and continue the second part. The next part, I should say.
All of the principles you're learning so far will help you navigate and evaluate complex chess positions. We're seeing that different factors, which sometimes seem completely irrelevant, have a profound impact on the strength or weakness of various pieces. It's the pawns that make a bishop good or bad. They also determine the supremacy of knight or bishop, and usually determine the strategic direction of the game. Now that we're seeing how previously unnoticeable elements of the chess landscape are key factors in determining the heart of the position, we should be actively using our new knowledge to mold positions into what works best for our surviving warriors. And we should learn how to trade away the pieces that are not so well suited for the nuances of a certain battlefield. This is the art of the trade.
As I was pointing out in the very first few videos about the pawns, very beginning players think, pawns are only worth 1 point, what's the difference? But in fact, the pawns and the pawn structure is ultimately the most important part of the game. So while they may be worth 1 point, not only do you have a lot of them, 8 to be exact, but they play a vital role in creating walls and barricades and other nuisances for your opponent. So, in any case, that's page 1 of 15, so we're going to page 2.
Okay, here are some guiding principles. Generally, you should trade pieces when, first, you are ahead in material. Second, you have a spatial disadvantage. Third, an exchange will make one of your surviving pieces more powerful. And fourth, you'll be getting rid of a very powerful piece of the opponent.
Okay.
First of all, you want to trade when you're ahead in material. The reason for this is, the more you trade down, the bigger your advantage actually gets. Think about pawns. If you have 8 pawns and your opponent has 7, you're up 1 pawn, fine. But if you trade one pair of pawns, 7 to 6. In fact, 7 to 6 is a bigger advantage than 8 to 7. 8 to 7 is a smaller ratio. If you continue to trade down, 6 to 5, 5 to 4, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1, now suddenly you have twice as many pawns as your opponent. You trade down one more pawn, suddenly you have a pawn, your opponent has no pawns. A big advantage, obviously. This holds true with all of the pieces. If you're ahead in material, by trading down you actually increase your advantage.
Okay.
Take a look at this position. It's white to move. What would you do? Well, here white is up a pawn, and has a bishop for a knight in an open game. But there's a way to simplify into a winning endgame. What is white's best move?
Well, let's take a look at this. I actually did go over this. I guess I must have skipped a few parts and I forgot about the one before, but this one I remember. Let's take a look at our attack. We obviously have the triple stack here of the queen and the 2 rooks. all attacking this square. We would love to checkmate the king right now in the back rank. Checkmate, right? Of course, that's not really possible. I mean, besides the fact that the queen is also here, this square is being guarded by 2 rooks and a knight. Well, you know, this bishop isn't doing a whole lot anyway. How about if we ask our friend the bishop to get rid of that defender?
That's right. The correct move is bishop takes c6. This may seem unprincipled because the bishop is slightly stronger than the knight because it's an open game, but in this case white can force a position which is relatively easy to win. As a rule, whenever you can reduce the complexity of a position into an endgame in which the path to victory is clear, do it. After bishop takes c6, black recaptures b takes c6, otherwise the back rank is undefended. Now you can continue to trade off. Rook d8 check. Black has to capture, rook takes d8. White plays rook takes d8. Once again, check, black has to take it. Rook takes d8. Now white plays queen takes d8 check. Black's only defensive mate is queen f8. Now white trades once more. Queen takes f8, king takes f8. Now look at this position. While in the first position the pawn might not have seemed so important, now the slight material edge is decisive.
Okay, so now all of a sudden the pawns are the most important part of the game.
Now let me show you how to win this king and pawn endgame. First of all, we know what to do. Activate the king. A critical principle in the endgame is to activate the king. So white can play king e2. Let's say black knows how to do that too. King e7. What you'll actually find when you play endgames against beginners is a lot of them don't know to activate their king, so you can win easily. But here you play king d3, king d6. Now let's say you make the move b4. What your plan's going to be in this position is next to play king d4. Then you could play the move a4 at one point. The queen side is really where you're going to focus. A basic way to win this position is to make a pass pawn on the queen side and distract black's king with it. Black will have to defend on the queen side, and then you can run your king to the king side. Remember I talked about the principle of two weaknesses. This applies in the endgame as well. White's potential pass pawn on the queen side is one weakness, and black's kingside pawns is the second weakness. So let's say black were to make a normal move, like f6 here. Now with white, you could even choose to play b5 right away. Black would take the pawn, c takes b5, and now let's say white plays a takes b5, black plays a takes b5, c takes b5. Now, white has a pass pawn on b5. Black's going to have to defend it. Let's say black moves his king back, trying to blockade the pawn with king c7. Now white can play king c5. Now let's say black makes the move king b7. Now white doesn't have to do this right away. White can take some time expanding on the king side first. What I want you to see here is that white can run his king to the king side and win the game. So you can play king d6. Now the black king has to take some time on the b pawn. King b6, king e7, king takes b5, king f7. And now it's clear that white's winning the game. Next, white will play king takes g7, take the f6 pawn. You can even take the h7 pawn. Then, slowly but surely, you'll push these 3 pawns up the board, queen one of them, and win the game. I go more deeply into detail about this type of position in the endgame course, and I really recommend you pay careful attention to those lessons after you finish this academy. For now, just think about the principle of two weaknesses, activating your king, and trading into winning endgames when you're ahead in material.
Alrighty then, and we will do the endgame course. And I'm still debating whether I'm going to make this in 2 or 3 videos. I mean, 1 or 2 videos, but I'm still thinking 2 videos on this one. So it'll be the 3rd video when we get into the endgame course. But I'm going to have to check that out first to see how long that is. In any case, too much talking. Let me get to the next topic.
The second principle of trading is that when you have a spatial disadvantage, it's good to trade. If your position is cramped, trading pieces will relieve your pressure. On the other hand, when the opponent is cramped, you want to increase pressure without allowing the liberation of exchanges. Here you can see that white has a huge spatial advantage and total central domination. Black has wasted a lot of time on flank moves, and now white is in control. Put yourself in black's shoes for a second. It's very hard to find a path of action. White, on the other hand, can easily develop with moves like bishop e3, bishop d3, castles, queen e2, rook a to e1, f5, etc. One of the biggest pluses of white's position is that he can develop freely while black is cramped. Now, imagine if black could trade kingside knights. Now take off the queenside knights. Suddenly black is gaining breathing room, and white's advantage is shrinking. So, when you have a spatial advantage, you want to increase pressure and avoid most exchanges. When you are defending positions with a spatial disadvantage, on the other hand, obviously the reverse holds true. You want to trade down as much as possible.
Okay.
Okay, the third principle of trading. When an exchange will make one of your surviving pieces more powerful, it's usually a good one. For example, you've already learned about good bishops and bad bishops, while sometimes trading off your opponent's last knight will make his bad bishop even worse. This is the type of situation we're looking for. So we've already seen some examples of this type of strategical trading. Here's another one.
Okay. Do I pick up a piece here? No, he doesn't want me to. Okay, next.
Here black has a huge hole in his position, the e6 square. It's white to move. What would you play?
Well, see, now, what he's talking about bad bishops, you've got a bad bishop here, essentially, okay? Wouldn't it be nice, and we've also got a good knight, meaning that it's easy to move in many different spaces. So why do we say we go ahead and trade this bishop of ours? Because his bishop is better than ours, I believe. We can't really go anywhere with the exception of here, whereas he, even though he's blocked off himself here, he can go here, he can go here, and he can go here. So he's more maneuverable. His bishop is better than ours. So let's go ahead and trade. Let's see if he'll take it.
That's right. White's best move is bishop h3, and suddenly white's position becomes completely dominant. After the trade of bishops, the white knight will lodge on e6, causing big problems for black. Notice that the black knight, though right next to e6, is actually quite far from the square, because it would take him 3 moves to get there. In this type of position, there's no time for that kind of maneuver, because white's king set attack would build too quickly. So here a well thought out trade, like bishop h3, can make a huge advantage emerge from nowhere. When the bishops are gone, the white knight on e6 will become a devastating force.
Okay.
Now take a look at this exercise. Black to move. What would you do?
Black to move. So what would we do? I don't know. I'd like to have my knight there. On the other hand, I'd like to activate my bishop. And our bishop is not all that great. It's not that bad either. What if we did this? This is a common move, pinning white's knight. I mean, I know that white's knight can't go here or here, but it can certainly maneuver over to here and here. Okay, let's do it.
Good job. The correct move is bishop g4. Okay, it's true, this is technically a good bishop, but after the bishop for knight trade, the black knight becomes an absolute monster on d4. Take a look at it. Getting rid of the knight on f3 made the black knight capable of dominating the center of the board, and the white bishop is terrible. This is a perfect example of good knight against bad bishop.
So I wasn't thinking far ahead enough, but I made the right move. Very good. We're learning together.
The fourth principle of trading is pretty straightforward, when you'll be getting rid of a very powerful piece of the opponent. Like in this exercise, it's white's move. Here black's knight on e3 is a thorn in white's side. The top priority should be to get rid of this powerful piece. What would you do? You have to calculate several moves ahead here.
Well, first thing we're going to do is flip the board because it's white's move. Okay, so our priority is to get rid of this knight. Well, it would be nice to get the knight over here or something to attack it and get rid of it and trade it off or something, but I can't even go here. So I'd have to get this queen out of the way, I think.
Good job. Here there are two possible solutions. Either move the queen, say to c1, and then play knight b1 to d2 to f1, trading off the knight on f1 for the knight on e3, getting rid of black's strong piece. Or you could play a4 on the first move, followed by knight a3 to c2. Personally, I prefer the first alternative because it doesn't further weaken white's pawn structure. By playing a4, you create another hole on b4. But the most important thing is to recognize the need to drive out the black knight.
Well, I got that one right.
Okay, you're about to jump into the mastery quiz, but first let's review the 4 principles of trading. First of all, you trade down when you're ahead in material. The more material that comes off, the bigger your advantage gets. Next, you trade off when you have a spatial disadvantage. If your opponent is crunching down on you, by trading off pieces, you relieve the pressure on your position. Third, you trade when an exchange will make one of your surviving pieces more powerful. For example, when trading bishop for knight, will leave you with a position with a very strong knight against a bad bishop of your opponent's. And fourth, you trade when you'll be getting rid of a very powerful piece of your opponent. Now, on to the mastery quiz.
Okay, well, I'm going to show you the beginning of the mastery quiz, and I've decided to end this particular video on the art of the trade because it is approaching, I don't know, I think I timed it to at least 25 minutes, perhaps even more. So after the preview of the mastery quiz, it would be approaching a half hour. So that'll be our next video, the mastery quiz. In the meantime, review all the rest of the videos. Take your time with this one. And here's the next part.
Okay, congratulations, you've come so far. Now you're ready for the mastery quiz. This test will involve positions in which you'll have to decide on the best plan given the strategic landmarks of the positions. Now these positions are not so simple, and the solutions won't necessarily be forced continuations. I'll be asking you to find plans based on the principles we've discussed in this section of the course. It's true, some of the solutions may involve tactical devices from part 2, but the theme of every problem is a strategic one. Remember, each one of the exercises is an opportunity to learn. If you struggle with it and can't find the answer, that's okay. The key is to work your mind, do the best you can, and then learn from my description. One secret about chess study is that you can only take as much as you give. In other words, if you don't even try to solve the problem and just listen to my explanation, you won't learn nearly as much as you would if you try to think creatively about each situation. Now let's rise to the challenge.
Alrighty then. I'm hoping sincerely that these videos are helping you. They are actually helping me just by making them for you. This is a taste of the last part of the of that particular section. Actually, I can show you this. I'll let you read this for a couple of seconds here. You can pause the video on it if you like. I'm going to show you this. That is the last part. The mastery quiz is the last part of the strategy. Okay, and then we'll move on to the end game course. Maybe I can give you a taste of the end game course too. Nah, I'll wait for next time. I think we're long enough right now. And after that, again, there's the end game course. The end game course consists of king and pawn, bishops of same color, bishop versus knight, bishop and knight versus rook, bishops of opposite color, rook and pawn. It's funny how he separates the bishops of same color and the bishops of opposite color by a couple of other things. But in any case, in this endgame course, you're going to see some of Josh's games. Waitkin versus Bonin. I'm not sure how to pronounce that name. Actually, there's quite a few games here. And I think what Josh is going to do is going to teach us the endgame course while he's showing us his games. And after that, there's the psychology of competition. And he does the same with some of his games. And then there's the actual annotated games, okay, in which he does the same thing. So we're almost there. This basically is the end of the main course. Let's call it like a dinner. It's a main course. Dessert would be the endgame course and the rest. So keep on playing and keep on practicing.